Hi everyone, and welcome to this Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain live stream. With me, Christopher Ludwig, Editor-in-Chief here, where I'm very excited. We're going to have the opportunity to be talking about the latest quarterly survey that we've been doing on finished vehicle logistics together with our partners, RPM. And this is an exclusive opportunity to dig into some of those details and also to talk through them with some of our experts from Stellantis and from RPM. We'll be getting into that in a moment, but just to welcome you all first and foremost. As you know, the supply chain has faced unprecedented disruption in recent years, and we continue to feel that on the finished vehicle side as well. And no doubt there are concerns, issues around things like capacity, driver shortages, as well as long-term views on investment, digitalization, and partnerships. What we at Automotive Logistics and Finished Vehicle Logistics have set out to do is to capture what our audience is thinking, how the trends are developing over a period of every 3 months. And to do that, we've partnered with RPM to capture that. And so firstly, I want to just tell you a little bit about our survey before I bring our guests on to talk through some of the results. So firstly, won't go into huge detail here, but this survey has been shared across our automotive logistics audience, and we've been seeing fantastic responses. It's very statistically robust. It's the second time we've done it, and the response rates are high and really give a great basis to capture what the finished vehicle logistics community is thinking. As you can see here, the split, this is across 2 of our surveys, also quite well balanced with roughly around 35 to 39% on the let's call them the finished vehicle logistics user side, so logistics service providers, as well as another roughly 30%, 25 to 30% on the 30% on the user side, as in OEMs, and on the service provider side, it's around 35 to 40%. And then, as you can see, split across a range of expertise across the value chain. So capturing a good segment and regionally well representative of certainly the audience that we speak to at Automotive Logistics, with around 40%, kind of some balance between North America and Europe, but also a significant share also weighing in from Asia, places like China, India, and Japan, South Korea. And this gives us an interesting point of comparison, of course, to look across the sector. So that gives you just a little bit of context about the survey itself. What we've done exclusively for this audience who are joining us is you can actually access a summary overview of the findings. The findings are very extensive, but we've created a short report available to our audience here. There's a link that's coming through to you shortly in the chat, or if you go to the handout section here on the platform, it's just in your control panel, you see handouts. The report is right there to download right now and take away from you. It's a summary report, some of the key points, but we're going to give you a chance to get more as well, and I will tell you a little bit about that later in the show, about how you can actually access the full findings of this very important survey. But as well as kind of talking about what the audience has said, understanding globally some of the trends we've put together today, we brought in a number of experts to help us understand some of those responses, to unpick the survey results and talk about what they mean for them. And I'm really excited that we're able to bring two great experts into frame here, and in the form of Nick Thompson, Manager Vehicle Operations North America at Stellantis, and Bill Kerrigan, who is the Chief Business Development Officer at RPM. And I'm going to ask both of you to join me on screen now and welcome you to our session here.
Hey, good morning, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Bill. Hi, Nick. Great to have you with you. I think you're tuning in from RPM's offices there in lovely Royal Oak, just outside of Detroit. So really excited that you could both join us and talk about this important survey.
Yeah, it's a beautiful sunny day here in Royal Oak, so Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And for those of you, I mean, many of you who are watching will perhaps know or heard of both of them, but both play key roles here. Obviously, Nick leading on Stellantis's vehicle logistics operations across North America, including imports, exports, domestic, and across the region, across modes. And Bill, of course, playing a very key role, relatively new to RPM, but playing a key role at this important logistics provider's business. And that's a great perspectives here to talk about our survey. But I want to kind of get into it a little bit here and talk first about some of our findings. So the first finding I wanted to just share that came out of our survey. As you see here, the share of respondents who expect increases in vehicle production over the next 3 months actually increased a bit. So we actually, in the survey, which was conducted over the summer, picked up a bit of optimism. Not a huge optimism, but there was more people in general who thought production is going to rise compared to what we've been seeing. So I kind of want to just ask our panelists to gaze a little bit into your own crystal balls, or from your perspective of what you're kind of expecting to see, particularly with a North America focus here, given where you both are. And Nick, I might sort of start with you there. I mean, where do you sort of see, without necessarily going to specifics, of course, as I'm sure you can, but are we kind of expecting stability, anticipating some increases, or some further declines in the coming months?
Yeah, Chris. So I think if you look back at when COVID actually started in 2020, we saw quite a bit of disruption right away. A lot of issues with production right after that kind of continued, for the next year or so. I think we're still dealing with some of those disruptions, but it's stabilized from where we were back in 2020 and even 2021. So I think the respondents, pick up on that as well, and I would agree with that assessment that things tend to be a little bit more stable here this year versus what we've seen over the last couple of years as people have become more used to the new environment, I would say.
Yeah, that's kind of a good point. And we sort of seem to be hearing that our audience in vehicle logistics, even if the disruptions are still quite challenging, they sort of know how to manage them somewhat better than perhaps we did in the face of it. Bill, does that sort of echo what you're feeling and seeing as well from your customers across RPM?
Yes, Chris, we're seeing a pickup in production in North America at the plants, both in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. But also a big part of this is the imports that we still see. The U.S. still imports 4 to 5 million cars a year. So for us at RPM, that's very important because we do a lot of work at the ports also. So that's coming back also. So the whole supply chain is slowly but surely getting back to where it was. We're still going to have shortages, we know that, but I think the production is going to pick up.
And I guess just on that too, I mean, the survey was that slight optimism reflected a slight optimism that was also around the chip side. So it seemed our survey was still seeing disruption, still obviously anticipating that the chip shortage would still be felt, but again, some improvements around that. Is that also the perspective, or is that contributing to this as well, Nick? Do you see some light at the end of this long tunnel?
So again, I think things have stabilized from where they were. I think we're still dealing with disruptions in production for whatever the reason, whether it's component availability or supply chain issues across the globe. As parts are coming in from different areas of the world, we have seen delays in the supply chain that have led to things. So I think the disruptions are more acute now than they were, back in 2020, where we saw long periods of downtime in the industry. And I think people are better at managing those risks and managing the situation. And those will be things that we still have to deal with from a variable standpoint. But I think people have gotten a lot better at it as an industry. And as a result, we've seen the production become more stable in the market.
So there's a crystal ball gazing, a bit of optimism there. That's a bit of a North America focus for sure. I'll say to our European audience, there might be a slightly mixed picture there, but let's take that for sure, because that leads on, if you like, to understanding where some of the challenges that are kind of specific to finished vehicle logistics that we're seeing. And as I kind of highlighted here, the top 3 challenges cited across our audience or respondents were volume volatility, capacity shortages, and labor shortages. So again, that's coming straight from our audience, and I think I have a little bit of a breakdown for you here, just to give the audience a snapshot of how that's sort of broken down. It's quite close on all 3 of those, really kind of neck and neck, if you like. Some other issues, of course, following that, whether it's investment in infrastructure, charter, fuel, but those are the 3 that really stand out. Again, I want to just kind of get your feel on it. How does that resonate with you, Nick? Is this the 3 for you? Does the order look a bit different? Is it an area where you're more concerned than in others?
From my perspective, capacity shortages would be the top on the list. I think as an industry, we've seen volumes lower than they've been historically, and we're still dealing with some of the capacity issues, right? So as volumes come back, as things get more stable, as we work through this issues moving forward, if we're having capacity issues now, how are we going to deal with the higher volumes and whenever that returns? So to me, that's a big concern and something we work a lot on with my team and my counterparts, and also with the other partners in the industry, other OEMs and things like that. That's a big focus for us. In regards to volatility, we touched on that a little bit. I think it's better than where it was. I think the volatility can be regional. It's not necessarily 100% across the board. I think some of it is specific to certain areas of the country. So I think we'll still deal with some of those, but it'll be more acute versus what we saw a couple of years ago. And then in regards to labor, we've seen that. I think that leads to some of the capacity concerns that we have. Those kind of go hand in hand, in my view. But again, I think that is also a regional to some extent, where we have bigger issues in certain areas of North America and no issues in other places. So, I think as people get more used to the new way of doing things, I think we'll see that improve, but it is something that we're working on regularly now, and a big focus for us, both of those issues, the labor and capacity.
Yeah, great. And we're going to come into some of those in more detail, but it's interesting what you say, Nick, in terms of capacity kind of superseding volatility for you, because actually that's the survey reflected that. So we saw providers of logistics services actually cited volatility more significantly than the OEMs themselves. And I thought, Bill, maybe that was something to pick up with you. I mean, an issue that we've known endemic in the industry for a while is around forecasting and sort of sharing of some of that information. Do you see information forecasting as kind of something that's become more transparent, something that's improving, still an area that you should work on in the industry? And is that making the volatility, if you like, more of a concern for many logistics providers?
Well, from a global perspective, Chris, I think the volatility is more acute, I would say, in China, Asia, and in Europe than it is in North America. You've seen a lot of shutdowns in China. You've seen lack of labor and lack of energy issues in Europe affect perhaps production going forward. Here in North America, it's a little bit more, how should I say, as Nick said, getting better, right? From a forecasting point of view, which is important for the providers. I think when we talk about the 3 issues that you just brought up, to me, the labor thing is still critical, because we lost so many good logistics professionals over COVID. People either taking early retirement, whether they were truck drivers or they worked at the railways or the Class 1 railroads, and to be able to replace those people is, proven to be a challenge, and I think will continue to prove to be a challenge for, the near future.
Yeah, it's an important point, Bill, and actually we're going to come a bit more onto some of those labor issues, because we want to share a few more bits from the survey. But maybe before we turn to some of the next issues, Nick, just on that forecasting and communication side of things, and I appreciate North America is showing some improvements here, but as Bill pointed out, there are global impacts. Is that something that Stellantis has addressed? Is it something you've focused on with your suppliers and your providers to try to share more often and either further out or however you can to help deal with some of that volatility where we face it?
Yeah, definitely, Chris. I think that started back when COVID first hit, as everyone was dealing with the situation, states closing down, dealerships closing down. It led to increased need for that communication on how the market was working, and so we started it there, and I think we've continued to grow on that over the last couple of years from where we were pre-COVID, in my opinion. So we definitely are working with our partners to try to provide as much information as we can, whether it's through our normal processes of, sharing annual volumes or something like that, as well as we have, monthly communication meetings with our providers to try to provide them with, the latest information that we can share. Obviously there's a lot of variables that we're managing as a company, and so some of that we can't disclose fully, but, we try to give what we can so people can plan. I think with the capacity issues that we've seen in the marketplace, it's becoming more and more important to have those discussions and try to best provide the information so our providers can plan, so they can make sure they have the resources and the people in place. So we've done a lot of things to try to share what information we can, so our providers who make our business possible by delivering our vehicles to our customers can do a good job and be prepared for that. So it's definitely something we've worked on and are continuing to work on fine tuning to make sure it's the right information.
Thanks, Nick, and I think that's a very important message that we perhaps has been some of the silver lining, if you like, in amongst these crises. If we just stay on the logistics capacity issue for a moment more, Nick, I'm going to turn to you again here. Is there an area where you're kind of currently, if we're looking over the next months and 2023, where maybe you're seeing particular challenges? I mean, as mentioned, we know there's been issues on road, we know on the ocean side and rail. Is it everything, or are there areas you'd kind of point to where the industry needs to take some real focus and work together to address?
Well, I would say the capacity issues go across that spectrum. It's just it can be regionally focused or lane focused. I wouldn't say there's a 100% capacity issue with every truckload area or every ocean lane or every rail lane like that. But I think in general, we're working on capacity issues with each of those industries to make sure that we can continue to distribute our vehicles. So, looking forward, the labor issues that you've mentioned, we are working with partners on the truckload side to try to help with recruiting and things like that. From a rail perspective, we're part of industry groups to collaborate with other OEMs and the railroads on how to best run the shared network, because that's important to all of us getting vehicles to our customers. And then on the ocean side, that forecasting we're talking about, so they can plan the vessels better, especially heading into next year with some of the regulatory changes that are coming up from a emission standpoint. We want to make sure to provide the best information we can so everybody can plan. But we are working across all of those industries to make sure that the capacity issues are being addressed, because they're within each one of them.
Yeah, and just as a point for the audience, and I'm sure many know, but when you talk about the emission side, I think in that case you're probably talking specifically on the ocean side, correct? In terms of how that might impact some RoRo sides of things with the low sulfur and other emission areas that are coming into force.
Yeah, there's the new regulatory requirements that are coming in place in 2023, January 23. So we're working with our providers on that to make sure we're understanding of the impacts of that and can continue to distribute our vehicles globally without issue.
And Bill, just as you look ahead as well at RPM with your customers, I mean, what are there other things along with what Nick mentioned that the industry should be collectively focusing on? Because if volumes are going to pick up, the issue becomes even more pronounced. So what does the industry collectively have to do over the next year to make sure it can actually help keep the vehicles moving?
Well, again, as you said, Chris, the forecasting is critical. I think on the trucking side, for the short time I've been here at RPM, we're providing a service that maybe wasn't there 2 or 3 years ago, where we have alternative forms of truck transportation, whether it be wedge or flatbed for cars going to destinations and dealers. So a little bit more resiliency on the truck side. The problem you have on the rail and the ocean side, the capacity-wise, is it takes a long time to build a ship. It takes a long time to build a rail car. And, I don't see the orders placed in there now. I don't know how they're really going to affect the network at this time. My background is more deeply in ocean than it was in anything else from before. I know that it takes 2-3 years to build a vessel. There's a few on the order books now, but I think we're going to see a shortage of capacity. Back in the day when we used to do a lot of short sea from places like Mexico and things, that was a easier form of transportation back then because it was probably more cost effective at the time. But the way increases in rates and things have gone up, people are going to have to look at their routings again and figure out, what's the best optimization that they can have for their own OEM. So.
Good. Thank you both, and appreciate you sharing some views on that. I want to share another set of results, or an area of results from the survey, and of course costs, inflation. We all know that this is impacting all of our societies, and not least across the supply chain. So here's what the respondents kind of pointed to. Maybe not a huge surprise that 73% were obviously most concerned around the fuel and energy costs, followed by labor and equipment. And I thought, again, it's not a secret that this is impacting. So Nick, have these rises in costs for logistics, has it put more emphasis on efficiency for Stellantis in terms of how you engineer your routes, the transport modes, the load factors, all of which must also be more challenging in some of this context as well? So, would you point to particular areas that were important for Stellantis here?
Yeah, I think cost is always a big factor in any business, and it's something that we definitely try to manage on our side, when we're distributing our vehicles to our customers. So, the market, I think we have commercial processes in place to, go through the bid process and things like that, to address what the market is going to bear as far as costs of transportation and things like that. So, I think our processes are in place to deal with the inflationary issues that are out there, and we have a good commercial team at Stellantis that works with our partners to work through this and make sure we can continue to distribute our vehicles cost effectively, even through the inflationary pressures that we've seen.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, one of the things, and when many of us met in California earlier this year at Finished Vehicle Logistics North America, the fuel rise was, let's say, very volatile at that point. It was rising very quickly. An issue at that point in time, at least, was around the surcharges, and of course how they could be adjusted. Maybe starting with you there, Nick, would you say issues like that have now been addressed with your partners? Clearly that it can't be an exact real time, but needs an ongoing sort of focus. Or is there still things that need to get adjusted on that side with your partner? Start with you there, Nick.
Yeah, we have mechanisms within our contracts to, deal with changes in fuel and fuel surcharge. That's essentially across, varies by industry, but they're in place to deal with the changes in fuel. I think what was unique over the last 12 months is just the rapid pace of the rise. If you look back a year ago, I think it's doubled in cost. So some of those levers may not have been designed to change so rapidly, and I think we dealt with some issues throughout the way, but now things that have stabilized as far as what we've seen on the fuel increases, they seem to be kind of flattening and coming down a little bit. That from my perspective, that's kind of been addressed. We've gotten through that massive increase that happened quickly, and things are in place to handle that going forward.
Would you would you agree there, Bill? Or again, is there, in the partnership sense of things, is there more that needs to be sort of done there?
No, I think all the OEM partners that we've been working with have been very flexible when it comes to the fuel part of the business. I know, for instance, the last 90 days, fuel has dropped every day for the last 86 days or 87 days, something like that.
Who's
It's
counting?
Yeah, exactly. It's still not where it should be, but hopefully, again, that's going to regulate itself out. But, we've always had fuel surcharges in contracts, whether it be on the ocean or on the trucking side. So it's something that I think the logistics industry deals with very well.
And I mean, I'll constantly come back to the partnership side of this, and because we all know that it's important. And we know that there are providers, some who would certainly really be struggling at this time, have been both when the fuel spiked, but also through some of that volatility, which hopefully is getting better. But has it required looking to partner in different ways, whether that's the length of contracts, whether that's certain terms? Clearly on the communication, we've addressed that. Are there other areas that this has prompted? I'll start with you there again, Nick.
Yeah, I think the challenges we've seen have led to more collaboration. We want to build partnerships that can be beneficial on both sides and allow us to deliver our vehicles to our customers with accuracy and reliability and be cost effective at the same time. And that's our push. And we're looking for partners who can help us get there. And as far as like contract terms and things like that, I can't speak to that too much, but I can say the biggest change that I've seen is just more collaboration with our partners on how to deal with things. So whether that's labor issues, what can we do differently to work around some of those, or capacity issues, or the volatility too. So it's just led to more collaboration in how we address problems and how we look forward into what we think the problems are going to be down the road. So I think that's the biggest change that I've seen.
Sure.
Yeah. Can you add to that, Bill? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I would echo that. I mean, I think the communication's been escalated, right? I believe there's a lot more flexibility on the behalf of the OEMs. Of course, if you're a provider, you want a longer term contract. So it's a way you can build value, not only for your OEM partner, but you can build internal value, so you can get the right people at the right places at the right times and keep that efficiency going. And efficiency is on our side also bring us the opportunity to invest in things like equipment. We're non-asset, but our asset-based partners, they need more equipment, right? So, and be able to train more people so you can use the equipment that you have.
That's an important point, and good to hear that there is that investment. Nick, from your side, where has Stellantis looked, seeing high in costs in some areas, has it prompted Stellantis to consider investment in certain areas, whether that's in your facilities or digitalization or other sorts of tools? Is it come into focus with the change in costs in some of these areas?
I think costs are always a big part of decisions, and that'll always be the case. I think that along with the capacity issues we've talked about have resulted in us having to look outside the box of how maybe we've done things traditionally. So whether that's routing vehicles differently, using different modes for switching modes, finding maybe alternative capacity that wasn't used in the past. I think it's led us to be more creative, and so costs definitely play a factor in that. But I think the big thing is making sure our vehicles get delivered to our customers, and that's the focus. How can we do that? How can we manage through that cost effectively, given some of the issues we've seen in the supply chain?
Great, and thanks to our audience. Our audience is starting to put some questions through. I will turn to them as we see them as relevant. So we'll keep the questions in the chat though, just as a word. So if those who have hands up, if you can just write your questions into the chat, we'll get to them as we can. One of the questions that came through, kind of connected to what we're talking about here, is with capacity issues on the road, for example, have you seen any more openness towards co-loading from the OEMs. I suppose we'll start with you on that one, Bill, in terms of if you've seen that. Obviously, a long age-old question in some ways, and then Stellantis, from your point, Nick, if that's something important for Stellantis. So starting with you, Bill.
Yeah, Chris, we've certainly seen more opportunities to co-load, especially at rail ramps and at ports, right? Where there is an opportunity to do that. We've talked to our customers across the board, and a lot of this comes down, unfortunately, to digitalization, which you talked about before, and how you have the IT infrastructure be able to do that and pass that messaging and that visibility and that tracking back down to the OEMs. So, IT has always been a, how should I say, a challenge sometimes on the FVL side of the business. And it's taught us how to be better and how to invest after our people. Our second thing we've been investing here is in our IT.
Excellent.
Yeah. And from my perspective, co-loading is something that we've always encouraged where it makes sense. We have a lot of distribution that's similar across the OEMs, and so where it makes sense to do that with our partners, whether it's rail or truckload, we definitely look to make it efficient because it's more cost effective for our partners, more cost effective for us, and gets our vehicles delivered faster. So we're definitely in support of that where the opportunity makes sense.
Great, so let's turn to other parts of the survey. Before we do, just firstly to remind those watching, you can download a summary of some of the findings right here on the platform in the handout section as a PDF. But if you want the whole thing, if you're interested in more, the RPM team are happy to share that. But some contact there, get in touch directly with Bill. You see the email there, and we'll drop it in the chat. And they can talk to you more about sharing more of the details. It's really extensive, and as I said, we're just giving you a bit of a flash overview today. But really do engage with us if you want more. But turning to the next issue, and it's already come up, of course, as a part of another topic, and I think we've even got some questions around it. 67% of respondents are concerned about driver shortages. This issue, we've seen it spike, perhaps as it had points which were worse, and maybe now in other regions it's worse than in North America. Still, definitely a major issue. Nick, is Stellantis taking any specific actions with its providers and partners to help address the driver shortages?
So the driver shortage issue has continued to be a topic of concern, over the last handful of years, and looking forward from all the surveys that are out there. So we're definitely working on this issue with our partners. We've done some collaborative things, whether it's joint recruiting type events, getting our HR involved with some of our major partners HR to see what we can do to help support and get candidates to our providers. So it is something that we're working on. I would say again, it's a bit regional on how big of an issue it is, but in the areas where we have some more concern, we definitely are doing things like that to partner with our truckload providers to see what we can do to help.
Bill, how do you? I know you say you're non-asset based, but you certainly work with lots of partners on this. How do you see the issue? Where do you see it important to address that?
Yeah, again, what we've seen across the board, Chris, is the shortage of drivers is mostly on what we call the traditional, stinger type carrier side, where 8 to 9 cars per truckload. We've been able to find a significant amount of drivers on the wedge side to handle some of those loads and those vehicles that are coming out of, again, ports and rail ramps to maybe not have to travel as far as they would traditionally. So it's a mix right now. And I think we're going to have to, I know the asset-based companies are out there, they've increased their offerings as far as, salaries and benefits to these people. But again, it takes time to train these people because it's just very specialized service they offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we know, the driver shortage is there, and I think, again, as I kind of alluded to, and I know that you both would see or feel this in other ways, the context is even more complicated globally. If we look at Europe right now and some of the impacts as a result of the war and Ukrainian drivers, this is also becoming even more acute in some places. So again, a global issue with lots of complexities around it. If we also look, oh yeah, please, Nick, sorry.
That, you know, I think how efficiently we utilize the drivers is also something we're working on with, you know, where there processes in place that don't fully utilize that driver, right? How can we get them in and out faster? How can we make it easier for them to effectively use their hours? You know, working with our sales group and dealerships to, you know, increase STI and driver delivery hours, things like that, working at our railheads to try to make the process more efficient for our trucking companies. I think that's part of it too. So it's not only just you know, how do we find more people? It's also how do we more effectively utilize the people we do have. So we're working on both those initiatives.
It's a great point. You know, broadly as well, and this isn't just around driver, let's say labor, but I think across various sorts of vehicle logistics. So the respondents really highlighted recruitment and retention as a top issue. And again, we know in the context of the so-called Great Resignation and other issues, this is something many industries and companies are facing. But if we look at it again, we focus in a little bit more, Nick, how much of a challenge do you see that staff retention and recruitment in the vehicle logistics space?
So there's definitely the labor challenges we've talked about, right? I think with this industry, you know, it's outside, rain, shine, snow, you know, that creates some challenges with the labor market out is today. Again, we see this regional, so it's not the same in every place, and we have to address it differently in each of the regions on how we approach it. But you know, it is tough. I think we see the next generations wanting to you know, work from home and do that type of thing, and so that's not conducive to working outside and loading trains and loading trucks and things like that. And so it's a challenge that we're working on with our partners to see how do we you know, help them recruit, what can we do differently to help their business so they can be more efficient, so we can use the people more effectively. So it's definitely a challenge that we're still working on with a lot of our partners right now.
Anything you'd add to that, Bill?
Well, you can tell, Chris, that I'm still around after 42 years. So that would give you an idea about us being able to recruit younger people, right? It's always been a challenge in logistics to get people from the day when I first came on board, again, from the ocean side of the business, when you worked on a terminal in January and it's, you know, 25 degrees, you know, outside and it's snowing, right? It's a difficult business to be in. You know, I'm sitting in here in a nice office now and everything, but going the day-to-day stuff that the guys have to do, loading trucks again or loading rail cars, as Nick said, it's a challenge to get people to do that work anymore. I think the more we can, again, to Nick's point, effectively utilize the people that are there and make them more strategic, that's going to be the challenge going forward. I think IT can help automate some of this so we can go ahead and maybe optimize what's coming at us better. But, you know, for instance, from my previous life, when we were handling some vehicles near Vancouver, we chose to valet the vehicles so that when the driver came in, he didn't have to pull them, you know, from those load lines. And that saved a lot of time and made them more effective. And I think that's some things that we have to look at going forward.
Bill also said he's going to be in South Carolina for the winter. So.
Yeah, it won't be too much.
What our audience can't see is the young, talented people that are actually behind the other side of helping make this wonderful picture work, right? Bill, so in that great office space there in Royal Oak, there is some great talent at the Go, despite your alongside your wisdom and experience. Let's put it that way.
I brought the average age up by about 10 years when I joined, so.
We have an audience question, and it is you have partly covered some of it, but I think I'll raise it because clearly it comes from the audience. What are the reasons for labor shortages? Are they COVID related? Is it the Great Resignation? And then the add-on to it, I think you both addressed that in some ways. The other one is, can you say anything about unionized labor in finished vehicle logistics and its influence in labor availability? Whether or not you want to go there or not, but that's the question from our audience. So if either of you have any thoughts on that.
I can start. You know, I mean, we definitely have union operations, non-union operations. You know, I don't see that being the issue. You know, it varies based on location, region, things like that. You know, as far as like attracting talent and people in this industry, again, I think it comes down to some of the variables that the employees deal with, being outside, that type of thing. I think that's a challenge for maybe the younger generation, whereas the older generations may have been more open to something like that. And I also think, you know, it's the availability of other professions to do as well that puts pressure on it. But again, I think this is an industry that's going to be around. We're going to continue to deliver vehicles, and so it's going to be here. And so it's how do we entice them to come back? How do we get them to want to do this? You know, loading cars. I mean, you get to see some of our cool products, whether you know it's Stellantis or GM or Ford or whoever. You know, it's pretty neat job to see some of the new products coming off the line. So
great. Yeah, and just on that point of talent and what we're discussing here, maybe it's a good time to just remind our audience that we're going to be talking quite a bit about that soon, including with our RPM and Stellantis team, which will be at this event, in our automotive logistics and supply chain global conference in Detroit in September 20th to 22. We'll put a link right there in the chat if you're interested to attend or follow it virtually. It's going to be a really fantastic event, and I'm not going to sit here and do more of an advertisement for it. I think the content you see here today speaks for itself, and we're really pleased that we partner with RPM for this as well. But just coming back to some results here, you know, talking about lead times. Here, the slide shows you some of the detail that we capture in this survey, right? Just to you know, really drill down. Without kind of dwelling too long on it, I think what it shows is that you know, we still have a lot of expectation for longer than normal lead times related to low inventory as well, and that's putting some other pressures on the supply chain. Nick, have these sort of longer lead times and let's say a lower inventory situation, has it changed the way you really operate your vehicle logistics in terms of more like built to order, assigning customers earlier in the pipeline, whether that's during shipment or even production? Has that been an important development for Stellantis?
So, you know, as an industry, I think it's pretty clear that the inventory levels at our dealerships across the industry are down from where they used to be. I think that has driven changes in the end customer. You know, there's less availability of vehicles on the lots to pick from. That ultimately leads to more, you know, orders being placed to directly build whatever car and customization they'd like across the board. So that has created some more pressure on reliability and visibility, and you know, sharing more information with the customer, the end customer. You know, and I think that is also driven by other industries as well. You know, you can order a package and track and trace all the way to your house. So that's putting pressure on the vehicle logistics industry to provide the same type of thing. You know, customers want to know where their vehicle is. They want to know when it's going to come, and they want to plan around it. And I think the challenge will continue to be there, and we're continuing to work on initiatives to provide better visibility to that. You know, I think the unique thing with vehicles is, you know, customers are looking for that visibility all the way back into production. Whereas you look at an Amazon or something like that, it's 10 miles away at a distribution center. So there's a lot of variability that is unique to the vehicle, you know, logistics distribution industry, that I think makes some challenges to providing that. But it is the expectation of a lot of our customers now to be able to see that type of thing.
Absolutely. In fact, at the vehicle logistics conference we held in California, I mean, I almost started calling it ETA North America, because that was everything was coming back to improving ETAs, and there's so much focus on that. Bill, are there areas where you've seen that improve, or areas where you'd still like to see it be able to improve?
I think it's one thing that's come out of the last couple of years. The structure is the last mile is going to change a lot depending upon the OEM and depending upon the type of vehicle that's being delivered. We've seen other OEMs that have started up that are delivering directly to customers' driveways, what they call white glove service, right? And then we've also seen that last mile, maybe not as significant as it was before, is now much more focused on when you have a sold car. So you've always, in Europe, Chris, right? You've always built to order, right? People would, wait 3-4 weeks for their cars. Now maybe the North American market's got more used to that here, maybe. I don't know. I think, again, it's going to be a hybrid. We're still going to see, obviously, cars going to dealerships. People want that experience to go to a dealer and look for their cars. Other people want to build it online. They want it delivered to their doorstep. So I think we're going to see a collection of ways in which cars are going to be delivered and done over next. But again, it comes back to digitalization, right? You've got to be able to track and trace and provide that visibility, not only for your OEM partner, but for the end customer.
Yeah, I think you're both making, this change in the last mile and these hybrid approaches within the business, bring such interesting complexities to the outbound space. And in the meantime, I think that sort of forced change that you're talking about there, Bill, with maybe the US customers getting more used to something, not so much by choice or by design, but by necessity. Whether that stays in that form or not, we will see. But we know there are many OEMs, Volvo just not want to name one, they're very openly and publicly talk about shifting to those models and what it will mean to vehicle logistics. And what you just said, on digitalization and visibility needing to be really, really key to that, because you need to be able to show and share. And what the survey did point out, in a lot more complexity, we just summed it up here, is that in effect, many parts of the vehicle logistics supply chain and processes are at best partly digitalized, in many cases not at all. And clearly, if we drill down into that, there's many areas of opportunity. Just asking either of you, if would you identify, have you identified a particular area, maybe it's the visibility which we're just talking about, where there are really opportunities and where we have to move ahead on that. Nick, what comes to the fore for Stellantis?
Visibility is a top concern. We've always been sharing ETAs with our customers, but the focus on that visibility for our customers and the reliability of the ETAs continues to grow every year as our customers' expectations demand that. I think so. We'll have a lot of initiatives that we work on with that. The other piece is managing some of the exceptions that take place as vehicles are moving from the plant to a dealership. So it's how do we use the cars themselves to tell us if the battery's low or if there's an issue. I see a big opportunity there moving forward. So that helps speed up the delivery because there's instances, where vehicles may not be identified until somebody goes to ship it. And so if the car can tell you when it's having that issue and you can address it without having a delay in the supply chain, I see that as an opportunity as well that we're looking at, and I think all of our partners are looking at how do we use that information as our vehicles get more technological. How do we harness that to help the distribution process?
Great points. Yeah. Anything you'd add to that, Bill?
Well, I've been associated with AIAG for a lot of years too, Chris, right? And these are things we've been working on. Unfortunately, again, because of COVID and not being able to get together, things have been slowed down very much, but we're still working with the ECG in Europe about standardization, and especially when it comes to connected car, right? So we can get these notices that, Nick was talking about on the vehicles, whether there's a problem or an exception that we have to deal with while the vehicle's en route. And again, we still operate too much of Excel spreadsheets. Excel spreadsheets have been around for way too many years, and we really have to make a quantum leap in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I believe, if we're going to improve the efficiency of how we deliver cars across the network.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely some important work that's being done by ECG, and I know that there's some further issues on standardization work that's coming out or has recently come out. So we definitely share more on that via Automotive Logistics and through ECG as well. The survey is not only about the, let's say, coal-faced issues that the industry is facing. We do try and capture sort of longer-term trends and developments. And one of the things is clearly around electrification. We ask the respondents to think about that from growth of EV, but also, of course, how it impacts vehicle logistics. And one of the things that came up, picks up both on the consumer side, but interestingly also on the distribution side, is around charging anxiety. So in effect, the infrastructure, where the infrastructure is there to handle EVs as they grow. We know the direction of travel here. We know big announcements already from Stellantis will ramp up over the coming years, and many other in the industry, and obviously regulations to try and push that as well. But what when you're looking with your network, Nick, starting with you, how are you preparing for this rise in EV with your providers? Is it on the infrastructure side? Is it on weights and dimensions? What does the industry need to be doing now to prepare?
Yeah, all those discussions are happening right now. I think we've been pretty public about our desire as a company to continue that push towards EV with our Dare Forward plan. When we see that across the industry, more and more OEMs looking to increase the percentage of EV vehicles. So we do need to prepare for it as an industry. That's things we're working on right now from an infrastructure standpoint. Where does it make sense to have charging stations? What type of charging stations do we need? What are the processes to deal with EVs versus a PHEV or a regular gas engine vehicle? So we're defining those now with our partners, so we can be prepared for the shift to EVs. And as well, to your point about weights and things like that is something that we are taking a look at to see what the impact will be, and where we may need to do things differently because of that. So all that's still being defined, I would say, right now as an industry. We're right in that tipping point, I'd say, before like all of that is defined and we start to deal more and more with these vehicles. But it's definitely something that we're working on every day.
Absolutely, and as I kind of just brought up the slide here, just kind of for reference to the audience to take in, really just does kind of reflect the areas, as you mentioned, Nick, that the industry is looking at. Between our two surveys, we're seeing a bit of a tick up too. I mean, we'll see it over the coming quarters as well. We expect that all to grow, to see more and more attention paid to it as the growth kind of continues. Anything on that side, Bill, from RPM and logistics provider point of view, in terms of this push towards EV and the impacts on the network?
Well, it's just, again, about charging the vehicles, right? Whether it's charging them at rail ramps or at ports, and the infrastructure that has to go into, which is indicated in the survey. And I think, again, that's a regional approach, because we're going to sell a lot more EVs in California, for instance, because of the regulations that are out there. They have a significant problem out there with their grid already, which you've probably seen in the news in the last week or so, with the heat that they've had and the rolling brownouts that they've had. It's something that's going to have to be addressed, Chris. And again, I don't think it's an expenditure that is going to be made by the OEMs. Of course, it's got to be made by whether state or federal governments and the grants that they're dealing with right now, because it takes a while to charge a vehicle. And if you're going to try to use it to travel just more going to work and back, it becomes an obstacle, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. And again, in the U.S. context, of course, we're seeing lots of money that is set to start flowing into these issues. And here in Europe, there's also a big push. But whether it's enough and in time, of course, remains to be seen, and how the customers jump to it. But we see lots of fascinating change on the way. We're coming close to time, and we're nearly through what we wanted to kind of share with our audience. But I think another point we wanted to raise, which is in the survey in more detail than this, is around the role of sustainability in vehicle logistics, particularly around emissions and emissions reporting and tracking. And what, at a high level, what the survey did show was that a minority of companies are still actually tracking this. That might actually be different on the OEM side, for example, but still not by any means the majority. And of course, if you're going to get so-called scope 3 tracking and really understand it across the value chain, many more are going to have to do it. Nick, for you at Stellantis, how much of a focus is this? How do you see that starting to change over the coming years?
Yeah, we've seen the focus on emissions and sustainability continue to grow, I would say, over the last handful of years, and will continue to grow moving forward. So, as I mentioned, our Dare Forward plan, as Stellantis outlines some of those initiatives of trying to reduce emissions as a company by 50% by 2030 and be net zero by 2038. So looking forward at that, these are going to become bigger and bigger parts of our decision-making process and parts of our business and how we run as we try to meet those goals that we've set out. And I see that trend in the industry across other partners, whether it's OEMs or industry partners in trucking and rail. I think we see this more and more prevalent as the years have gone on.
Yeah, anything you want to add to that, Bill?
No, I just think the automotive industry as a whole, Chris, has been very proactive about emissions, all the way from, again, the OEMs and the production and what kind of cars we're building, to the steamship carriers, and the rails and the trucking companies. I think it's something we should be very proud of.
Yeah, and it's great to see some of that progress coming in. With the survey picks up on where perhaps there are some challenges. For example, switching perhaps to alternative fuels, renewables, as we see here. The survey picks up on cost still being a factor there. I can imagine some of the current crises, perhaps here, especially in Europe, don't make some of that easier. But nonetheless, we're seeing at least more interest in things like electrification of tractor units, on the commercial vehicle side, hydrogen in some cases. A long-term view, not something that solves the issue next year or something like that. Is that also, is these sorts of technologies important, or do you think will become more important for you, Nick, as well, as part of that strategy and those targets for 2038 and before, as you mentioned?
Definitely, yeah. As we look to meet those goals, I think we'll have to look at doing things differently than how we've done them in the past. And so that opens up discussions about those types of alternative capacities, the eco engines or anything like that. Those are discussions that we're having and investigating to see what makes sense and where it makes sense to implement those types of things. So, sustainability is important to us, and with our goals, I think we've made that clear. So definitely these types of initiatives are things we're going to investigate and look into moving forward.
And if I might just mention as well that at the Detroit conference, one of our opening speakers from the Department of Energy in a brand new office of manufacturing, the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chain Sustainability. So it shows you just how important this is becoming at a government level. Regulations and investment that will come into that. We'll talk more about that in Detroit, but good chance that we'll see regulations, as you both alluded to, regulations that start to incentivize and encourage this more as well in the US, as we've seen elsewhere too. I wanted to come on to one of our last points. We have touched on it, I have to say, at various points already at the in this live stream, and just to say the survey does recognize progress, but of course it is perhaps patchy at best, is what we might describe it as. Here's just a snapshot of what the respondents kind of said, probably at a high level here, because you can drill down into many points where it happens better than others. But to kind of finish us off, how can this improve? You all both stated the importance of it. Clearly the industry wants to see it happen, wants to see it happen faster. How do you see it developing? Where do you see the opportunities to improve that? I'll start with you, Bill, and then you, Nick.
Well, Chris, we've been talking about collaboration for a long, long time, and there's a couple things that make it difficult for it to happen. One is antitrust, right? As we know, right? Is the ability for the OEM partners to sit together and talk about what their, what really is their marketing plans, and that's something that they can't really share. The second part of it is the ability to take all that data and make sense of it, right? It's not, so you don't physically have to have somebody sitting out there, oh, that bin has to go to the same area code as that bin of that OEM. We don't have that technology yet, and we still haven't developed it. We're working here at RPM very, very, very diligently on automating a lot of this, so we don't have to have people and resources to do it, so we can literally do it through AI. And until we get to that point and be able to show the OEMs that there is a savings and what we can do for them on that, that's going to be the crossroads that we have to get to.
Great point. Nick?
Yeah, from my perspective, I've seen our collaboration grow leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. I mentioned before some of the industries that we're a part of as Stellantis, working with the railroads, along with the other OEMs on some of the challenges, and the communication that's taken place there over the last couple of years has been much more frequent and much more collaborative than it's ever been in the previous 5 or 10 years that I've been around vehicle logistics. So I think we're heading in that direction where we can. I think from a provider perspective, some of the volatility that's seen in the production is maybe seen as not being collaborative, and maybe that's where some of the survey scores came from. But I think we're where we can, we're trying to share. We're going to continue to communicate. We're going to continue to try to share forecasting volumes so people can plan their operation. And so we're going to do those things to try to collaborate and work on the initiatives that make sense in the industry. Like we were talking about with electrification, standardizing certain things, whether it's what type of charging station should we put at a shared facility, things like that. So I think, collaboration is improving. It's improved over the last couple of years. It'll continue to improve, and we just need to find the right areas to work on.
Well, that will be music to the ears of many in the industry, Nick, and certainly it is encouraging to hear that focus and priority from Stellantis. That's the time that we're going to have to talk through this, but I really want to thank both of you, because it's been such a great opportunity to share some of these results with our audience and hear directly from both of you how they resonate and what your focus is. So I think it's invaluable, and I really thank both of you for that time and for letting me and our global audience into the RPM offices there in Royal Oak. Thanks again to both of you.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to seeing you in Detroit.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, pleasure, Bill. Thanks again so much. And just a reminder again to all of you who joined us, you can download the overview, the summary of these results right here on the platform. Please take the handout or click onto our website in the link that we've provided you, and you can take that away. That's a short overview of some of the key findings. But as mentioned, if you're interested in more, if you want the whole hog, so to speak, go to the man himself. There's the contact details for Bill, and we can talk about sharing more with you. As mentioned, and Nick just kindly mentioned, we're going to see many of you, I hope, either online or in person. Hopefully, many of you as possible in person in Detroit in just a few weeks at the NGM Grant for Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Global 2022. I can reveal that this is tracking to be the biggest event we've ever done, so we're really excited about that, and great to get everyone together. If you can't make it, register for an online pass and follow some of that there. RPM is there, Stellantis is there. We're looking forward to seeing you there. And yeah, mark your calendars as well next year for Huntington Beach again in California in May. We'll have some exciting news about that soon on finished vehicle logistics, which we'll reveal to you soon. But for now, thanks to everyone. Thanks again to the team over in Royal Oak, and we really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you soon. And watch out for the next survey, which I should say is going to be launching soon, for the chance for you to give your views again. So in just a few weeks, we'll have that on our automotive logistics website, and you'll have the chance to contribute. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great weekend. Signing off from here in the UK, where I guess I should also say,
God save the king.
There you go. Take care.
bye, everyone.